Thanks, John. Well, thanks for you two for being here. Cybersecurity is, as I found out in one of the breakout sessions that I moderated, a topic that is keeping all CFOs and I guess everyone here in the room busy, with more companies than ever relying on the internet, and every device or most devices that we buy these days connected to the internet. Maybe do we need a new definition of security and cybersecurity?
Is that for me?
That's for you, Kevin.
I have
That's
to go first.
For you.
You know, I think, do we need a new definition? I just think we need risks or repercussions to hacking our companies. I don't know when you woke up last and saw a newspaper that said, hey, we arrested a hacker. And then they even had the right person. So I think it's real important to impose risks, repercussions, proportional response. And the anonymity of the internet is a big challenge for every single company. And we even had this at my company where somebody anonymously hacked one of our employees and posted some of their emails online, and we had to deal with that issue. The anonymity of the internet is you're going to have privacy advocates say we need it, but as long as you have it, it's going to accentuate the action of wrongdoers, and then there's just no risk or repercussions. So I don't think we need to change the definition of security, but we have to find a way to impose risk to the attackers.
Phyllis, how is that from your experience at Promontory and also the Department of Homeland Security? What do you see, what kind of risk do you see companies willing to take?
That's a great question. And first of all, thank you very much for having us here and for bringing cybersecurity out of the IT world and into the real world, where we actually look at it as risk, and certainly in the CFO positions, looking at what it means to a company. So I think, first of all, from the private sector perspective, cybersecurity is an enabler. It's not a thing of its own anymore. It's about how you protect your reputation and what your company's about, and it's a boardroom kind of a decision. From the other hat, it's really something that we as a community have to pull together, again, as risk, but and thinking a lot about what Kevin said also, it's part of our world. We are all connected. We're lighting up new devices every day. If you can't eat it, it's electronic. It's taking in information. It's potentially anonymizing it, maybe not. It's putting it back out. And we really have to look at this as a much broader corporate issue, government issue, and if you were to redesign and how does it fit into risk, this is something that's in our lives, and we're out innovating, which is a good thing, the innovation, but we're out innovating our ability to protect it against, in my opinion, a group of adversaries that have no lawyers. Apologies if any of you are lawyers. They have no way of life to protect, and they've got plenty of money. So our adversaries and those who want to cause harm to physical things or take information or cause harm to companies, they execute with an agility we have yet to enjoy.
One of the things that came up in earlier discussions was this change from a expectation, well, actually, we are so safe we cannot be breached, to the admission by CFOs saying, well, actually, we assume we will be breached. It's more this, like, how do we detect it and how do we make sure that we are reacting to it? Kevin, how is that with regards to dwell time that you see with those companies that you advise? Have you seen that going down, and also then the reaction to it? How has that developed?
Just to give you some context, at my company, we respond, at least last year, we responded to over 600 computer intrusions, meaning someone was compromised and they knew it and they needed outside help. So I have a skewed vantage point. Nobody calls us to figure out what happened and what to do about it when they're 5 minutes behind the intrusion. They usually can mop that up and figure that out. So we get called when it's usually a nation state behind the attack. It's usually China, Russia, North Korea, Iran. Every once in a while we have unknowns. So that's my frame of reference. So it's going to be a little bit, we're not dealing with the drive-by shootings on the internet, let's put it that way. And having said that, I forgot the question. So what was that question? I just want to make sure you had the context of everything I say. I'm coming at it from the victim's perspective of being targeted, fixing it, dealing with disclosure isgies, dealing with all the different risks that come up.
Yeah, the question was whether, like, given that it seems as if it's
more...
the
security breaches are an inevitable thing.
Yeah, no, given that companies are becoming much more aware of this issue, do they actually, when they're adjusting their mindset, and if they're saying, well, we're going to this detect and deal with it mindset, then the time between discovery and company dealing with it, is that going down?
It depends on region. You know, I can tell you, I started a company in 2004, and I had a website that said, security breaches are inevitable, don't be a headline. It was a wildly unpopular website. And so then I had to figure out, well, what's another way to say security breaches are inevitable? And this is why I'm not in marketing, because I came up with, you cannot solely rely on preventive measures. That is boring, but that's the situation in cybersecurity, is I think you do have to have, at least right now, because it's human nature being exploited. It's a lot of companies, it's all about the availability of the data that runs their company. So when you make data available to everybody, it's really hard to figure out when you make it available to everybody, is there's unauthorized access or not. The dwell time, what I've observed is it has gone down. We started measuring it right around 1998, and it's from the moment you're compromised to the moment you know you're compromised. That's dwell time. And it's under 100 days now for the 600 intrusions that we responded to last year. There's always an anomaly. When we respond to intrusions in Asia, I think dwell time was over 1,000 days for whatever reason. But there's a couple of outliers there that really swung that. So anyway, bottom line, dwell times come down. It used to be over 200 days. It's down to under 100. But here's the reality. Once it's over 5 days, you usually have a problem. So if you figure out, hey, we've been compromised, there's an active human on our network stealing data, and you're 5 days behind the problem, it's probably at a scale and scope that needs some management.
Phyllis, how's that with the companies that you advise these days? I think one of the core things is that this definition of security that we talked about earlier, that's something which is held throughout the organization. So not just amongst people on the board, but also then throughout different layers of the company. What are the solutions of those companies that you work with to make sure that the understanding of security and how to protect it is the same in all offices across the world and also all layers of an organization?
I wish we could ensure all of that. I'll take a crack at that. So there is no real cybersecurity, right? There's risk mitigation. And it's really understanding, what do I have to protect? I don't want to put a $5 lock on a $2 item. But then how are the resources allocated, and what do I worry about most? And if you think about, I love the word dwell time. I'm going to give you another term, Klingon time. In cyber operations, we all speak, that's what I come from, so my team comes from, we all speak Klingon. Right, so I hire only operators that have been there, hands on keyboards. So when we talk to board members, we can say, I've been there, I've been in those shoes, here's what you're looking at. But in those operation centers, they're all, and I had this when I was formerly at Homeland Security as well, large ops centers full of people that see little bits of information coming together, constellations that come together, and all of a sudden you see something that is indicative of maybe that's an event. And there's a lot of work in the industry. Kevin and others have spent years working on how you gather threat intelligence and put it together. And, but at some point, someone figures out there is something here. And normally, that is someone that speaks Cyber Klingon. And what we're helping customers do is push that more quickly to someone like yourselves or in a role lateral to you, where the decision about whether or not this means something can be made, whether or not it's in the 5 days, we're not sure, but can be made before you're a headline. So executives aren't selling stock inadvertently, for example, where it just looks bad. Or somebody can decide if it's a material event, needs to get reported to a regulator. And there's a gap right now between what people are seeing in cyberland, what your own operations people are doing or your third-party providers doing, and what your executives that need to make that decision are doing. So that's one thing we're doing. The other is I'm not a big fan of the concept of compliance. Right? You have to have it. It's important to protect customers. But the adversary knows exactly what boxes you have to check. And a good adversary, and they're all well-funded and fairly witted, will go around it. So what you want to do is use that money you're spending on compliance and regulation and use that entire exercise to get resilience out of that. That means you're going to understand that you're going to get attacked while you're running and continue to running. You've got to continue to fly that plane. You have to have a plan. A communications plan, a legal plan, certainly a response plan. Know somebody that you would call, for example, when this happens, when you discover it, so that, quote, dwell time doesn't hurt you. And so that your company is a good headline. Hey, we found it, we own it. And I think that's the most important thing you can do, and that will help to cut the sort of profit model that some of the cyber adversaries have gained over us.
of course, you're preaching to an audience of converted, of converted executives, given that it's all finance chiefs who are aware of this, the issue of cybersecurity and what it means to their business. How have you, and especially you, Kevin, found interaction with executives to make them more aware of this issue, given, of course, that you said you're dealing mostly with really high-level threats?
Yeah, I think after a security breach, you definitely get the board's attention if there's disclosure. Even when there's not public disclosure, a lot of times you'll have to go in and meet with board members and kind of brief, here's what happened, here's what to do about it, and there's a lot of moving parts. But what I've generally observed at the board level is there's kind of a progression depending on industry. Some industries are more compliance-based than others. Some are, really think about security. But lesson one is be aware of the cyber threat. And then lesson two is, so what do we do about it? And I think it's always really hard to communicate cybersecurity in a boardroom. I don't think you can go in and say, here's our 4-dimensional compliance pie chart, and you literally just go, wow, there's 110 controls. I've heard board members go, what the heck is access control? What is this? What is that? You don't have to go that far, but I think at the highest level of an organization, you have to have your risk profile, and then you have to figure out how to manage that risk profile. And I've always told companies in the boardroom, figure out the 5 things that you don't want to have become a reality, and then safeguard against those 5 things as best as you can, and try to measure that. A lot of ways to answer that question. I can spend a lot of time on it. But if I'm a CFO in this room, I'm always thinking, what are the 3 to 5 things that matter most to our business? Where can a cyber attack impact those 3 to 5 things? And one could just be corporate reputation and brand. But and then figure out how to safeguard against those things becoming a reality. Have a security program built around what matters most.
That's maybe a good point to lead us to a poll question, which is looking at this, exactly this point of saying, in how far are security chiefs and cybersecurity chiefs involved in the company's key decision-making progress, which I guess is, one of the things that I found out in previous conversations with you, that we see this transformation from IT and cybersecurity being an adjunct function somewhere to something which has become much, much more of a board central issue, even though you've also mentioned, Kevin, this the challenge of communicating with the board, given that, of course, we're talking about something which is very, very complex. That's an interesting finding. So we see that close to 65% of people here in the room say cybersecurity chiefs participate in the company's key decision-making processes. Is that something that you also see with businesses you advise, Phyllis?
I'm seeing a lot more of it. So cybersecurity has finally been taken out of the IT area. The IT folks are brilliant, and they will implement what you need, but they can't decide what you need. So looking at how your company goes forward, they should be part of that, because many companies, for example, run on data. Everybody needs data. Big decisions such as which types of data have to be protected in what ways, whether it's regulation-based or your own decisions for your own regulation. There are technical solutions that will do each of those things, but those are decisions for you and your colleagues, and the IT folks are the role to implement it. And more we're seeing the Chief Information Security Officer, which is really a figment of the past couple of decades. I think that's a newer position. We're seeing that person be a 3-way, an interface to the board or to the committee that helps the board understand these issues. We're seeing that person obviously advise with the IT team or the CIO, depending on the structure. And we're seeing that person take much more of an active role in what's this company about, what do we do, because what that person can do is translate very often between what IT can do, what technology can do, sometimes what technology you should even buy, sell, or make, and then bring that together. And that's a very hard skill set to find in one person. And it's also a very, very hard job. You worry about these CISOs because many of them look at the role as, yes, we're in it because we love it and it's important, but previously to the past, I would say 5 to 7 years, an observation that I saw in many hats was that the CISO did a lot of good work, but was only sort of noticed when something bad happened, and they were sort of the head that got cut off when something bad happened. So we really need to make this role, for many reasons, one that is much more central. And you're seeing it a lot in the financial sector, in whether it's line 1 or line 2 of the lines of business. And you're often seeing a hybrid. Yes, it's risk, which puts it in 2, but it's also advising the board because it has everything in the world to do with the company's reputation. So you're seeing a hybrid between frontline and risk.
Kevin, coming back to this question of the interaction with the board, what do you see with companies that you work with? Like, at what point is it required that the board is informed? What are the steps that need to be taken, and is that something which...
If there's an incident? Yeah, I think a lot of stakeholders, when you have an incident, depends on the industry you're in. There's a different threshold of what do you have to say and when. There is a lot of discretion. It is frustrating because a lot of times when there's an incident, most of the general public does not understand the complexity of it and how long it takes you to get your arms around it. And there's nothing more frustrating than disclosure during the fog of war, and we've had to live through that. But again, my answer would be kind of long. It's complicated. At the end of the day, every incident does have different disclosure requirements, if any. And different stakeholders that you disclose to. It could be an insurance company, could be shareholders, could be customers, could be the public, and each one you may share a different amount of data with. So all I do know is this: best to get your arms around the incident as much as possible and then talk about it, because there's a lot of complexity when you are disclosing details, but you're not sure as to what's the scope of the whole breach.
Phillips, one of the questions that came up in one of the earlier sessions that we had, on the conversation that I have had with CFOs was, well, I'm spending more, I'm ramping up my spending in cybersecurity, but I'm never really sure whether it's enough or not. What are you telling clients that come to you with that question, and how do people actually assess whether their cybersecurity spending is effective or not?
Yeah, so there's no right answer to that. I don't know. There's a long answer and a short answer. In summary, it's not about what you spend. It's about knowing what you want to protect and prioritizing that. You know, Kevin makes a great point about an incident. It's a dance. It's a choreography. When something happens, you have to be mindful that you have a central message, that you have muscle memory, that your team has practiced this before. Because when your hair is on fire in crisis, that's not the time to figure out who you're calling in law enforcement, who you're going to call in the private sector to help you mitigate it. What your communications people are prepared to write, all of that has to be ready for you, because someone's going to call one of your salespeople and they're going to say whatever, and not their fault, but if they haven't been given a message, the wrong thing will get out. So when you look at what you spend, it's internal resources also on how you do exercises and business continuity planning and backing things up technically as well as with people. So it's really, have you matched your risk to the tolerance that your company is willing to take? And I would caution, when someone comes in with a very expensive but all-inclusive solve-it-all plan, be careful, because it's really not about the money you're spending. It's about trusting the people that are helping you make those decisions and owning it as a company.
Let's get Kevin's answer to that same question, and then we'll go to questions in the audience.
Yeah, I think the biggest bang for buck. So I've been in the boardroom, and I'm sitting there, and when our CISO briefs you, and anything's in the green on the briefing, you doubt what they're telling you. They're like, wait, are we really in the green there? If they put something in the red, you're like, now we got to do something about it. And if they put something in yellow, you don't know how to feel. So the bottom line is the CISO can't win in the boardroom anyway. If it's in the green, we don't believe it. If it's in the red, it's bad. When it's yellow, we're frustrated, and we don't know how to emotionally respond to it. What I think works best for me personally, and then for a lot of organizations, red team it. If you have 5 threats you don't want to have become a reality, get folks to see if they can enact those threats from the internet. And the reason why that matters is I think that also withstands third-party inspection. Most boards, when you boil down how good do they want their computer security program or cybersecurity program to be, it's if anything bad happens, we will withstand third-party inspection from whatever parties inspect us, whether that's the government, whether it's our shareholders, whether it's our customers. The best way to do that is test it. That simple. And what more can you do if 3 former exploit developers from an intel agency can't break in and steal your stuff? What more can you do? And you get a little bit more unvarnished truth. So we call that red teaming. Red team for the threats. And don't just red team, can they break in? See if they can break in and steal the CEO's email. See if the red team can break in and steal credit card data or customer data or get to the assembly line or get to a SCADA system or impact industrial control systems. And then you get unvarnished truth, and you don't have to react to red, green, or yellow. You react to a red team briefing of, yes, we could shut down the plant, or no, we couldn't. And then I'd feel pretty good about the results if they can.
Yeah, a lot of your younger employees are going to love to be on that red team.
Yeah.
Read the CEO's emails. Questions from the audience? Free advice. Right back here. Just tell us who you are. Oops, can we get
Once
the
again?
microphone on? Okay. That's good.
Stan Statula from Pitney Bowes. Maybe a narrow question, but ransomware, do we pay it as a CFO?
No. And I'm a former, so this is my personal opinion, not ever representing the U.S. government. We always told people to never pay the ransom. Two reasons. One is there's no reason to believe that they'll do what you want. Maybe you have a high integrity criminal, maybe you don't. But the other reason, you just egg it on when you do that. And there are other technical ways, especially the advanced planning and what Kevin's talking about with the red teaming to fix that. I would not ever advise someone to pay it.
What are the advanced ways, Phyllis, to protect yourself against the need to pay ransomware?
So if you look back, people would say to protect a database from getting corrupted, have a backup. Well, the bad guys are actually really smart people in many cases. So they corrupt the backup because they're connected. So looking at how you do these preparations to make sure that what you're going to use to back up your data or to overwrite corrupted data with good data is at the ready but not connected and not admissible. Do tests with you, and this is probably included in the red teaming, but for fun. Send phishing emails to your employees. See what happens. See who clicks on a link. Two of them got the U.S. government in a pretty fun way. One was, hey, free Redskins tickets. And the people who clicked on it, that went through TSA, the folks that do your inspections at the airport. The folks that clicked on it, Admiral Neffinger did this little test. He said, come here to the Coast Guard headquarters, brand new building, beautiful building. But to get your Redskins tickets, we'll have a little event for you. Free cyber training. And the other one, I believe, was sent out right in the middle of some scandal with this particular website that it went to a bunch of, this was not on purpose, but it went to a bunch of employees. It said, you're on Ashley Madison, but we'll get you off, click here. And,
All right, so as a preventative for ransomware payments, putting your data in an undisclosed location.
well, not undisclosed, but protected.
Yeah.
And not able to be, yeah.
Okay, good. Other questions? Yes, right over here.
Hi, Amy Shelley from the Options Clearing Corporation. So we know that cyber incidents are going to happen, and there's been a lot of bad press, and there are always going to be a lot of bad press for companies that handle it poorly. Do you have any advice of how we can help, we as CFOs can help message to our board members to have the appropriate response as opposed to what I'll call a Chicken Little response that the sky is falling when something happens?
So I in my bag, I actually have, and by now it's pretty crumbled, like the 6 things I say, because I do get a call a lot of times on the major breaches. Virtually every headline you've read, we've responded to, and my phone's rang, and I can tell you this, wow. A, never disclose anything unless you know it to be true. Never disclose it's hard to disclose what you don't know. It usually comes back to haunt you. Ultimately, it's stay calm, because a lot of people go out too quick, too soon, and then as the message changes, they start getting beat up. And in short, when I think about your question, when you handle an incident, you're always thinking, okay, let's handle it in a way where we're proud if it's on the cover of the Washington Post. These things, I've predicted the public response to them wrong, and I've predicted the government's response to them wrong. So, and I do this more than anybody. Here's the reality. Do everything you can to stick to your plan. And wow, I could talk about this one for an hour. It's a tough situation. It's different every time. But when I've seen people vacillate with their plan, they go public with something, and 3 days later, they're starting to waffle. These things are like car crashes. The public will stop, and you don't know if they're going to stop and look at the crash for 1 day or 30 days. But for however long the public stops and watches your breach, it's a lonely planet for you.
Is there a company that you can share name of that you think did it well? Once it began to happen, they didn't have to breathe into the paper bag.
It's real hard for me with the NDAs we've had, and I've been in the room. The number one question the board will have when they're doing public disclosure, they'll ask me is, what's going to be the response of the audience to disclosing to? 9 times out of 10, it's the public. And I'm sitting there going, well, I hate to say it, but you're hoping someone famous dies tomorrow and you go public that day. I hate to say it, but you never know. I can't guess. You look at Target, they thought the truth would set them free. Great people sharing their ongoing investigative conclusions with the public. They got beat up from it. Home Depot, all the disclosure was virtually the same, and nobody really noticed the breach. So it's real hard to predict. Bottom bottom line is where it goes south is when the plan that everybody agreed to, people start waffling on because of the pressure from the outside. Just one man's opinion.
Phyllis, Kevin, Nina, thank you so much.